Assalamu alaikum, adab, good morning, sat sri akal, namaskar. My name is Sayyid Qaswar Abbas. Today, I'm going to talk about United Nations Sustainable Development Goal number 17, Partnerships for the Goals. Strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Definition and explanation. Partnering is an essential approach to SDG impact. The 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals represent a fundamental shift in thinking in international development, recognizing the interconnectedness of prosperous business, a thriving society, and a healthy environment. The agenda names all three sectors as key development actors and requires an unprecedented level of cooperation and collaboration among civil society, business, government, NGOs, foundations, academia, and others for its achievement. In other words, the 2030 Agenda and the SDGs are the result of and a call for a new collaborative way of working. The 2030 Agenda sends a powerful signal that old ways of thinking and working, often tackling symptoms rather than root causes and focusing narrowly on single issue goals, simply do not deliver the fundamental shifts our planet requires for countries to deliver a sufficiently high quality of life to all their citizens while operating within sustainable natural resource limits. No country is currently able to achieve this. And when it comes to the 2030 Agenda, we are all developing countries. Strengthening global partnerships and enhancing the means of implementing the goals have remained a challenge owing to scarce financial resources, trade tensions, technological obstacles, and a lack of the pandemic is adding hardships to the implementation of the goals. As COVID 19 continues to spread, global financial markets have experienced great losses and intense volatility and many more problems. $100 billion in capital has flowed out of emerging markets since the outbreak, the largest outflow ever recorded. World trade is expected to plunge by between 13 and 32% in 2020. Strengthening multilateralism and global partnership is more important than ever before. The global nature of the pandemic requires the participation of all governments, the private sector, civil society organizations, and people throughout the world. Finance. Rose totaled $147 billion in 2019, nearly the same level as in 2018, but with an increased share going to the neediest countries. Bilateral ODA to CISET developed countries rose by 3% in real terms since 2018, with aid to Africa rising by 1%, but humanitarian aid fell by 3%. Global foreign direct investment flows continue to slide, falling by 13% from a revised $1.5 trillion in 2017 to $1.3 trillion in the decline. The third consecutive annual decrease in FDI was mainly a result of large repatriation of accumulated foreign earnings by multinational enterprises following tax reforms introduced at the end of 2017. It is projected that the pandemic may cause global FDI to shrink by 30 to 40% in the period 2020 to 2022. Remittance flows to lower middle income countries are estimated to have reached 554 billion US dollars in 2019, exceeding official aid by a factor of 3 since the mid 1990s. In 2019, remittances overtook FDI flows to lower middle income countries, according to estimates. However, growth in remittance flows slowed to 4.7% in 2019, compared with a robust 8.6% in 2018. Global remittances are projected to fall to $445 billion or by 20% in 2020 owing to pandemic. Globally, government revenue accounted for approximately 30% of GDP in 2018, remaining stable compared with previous years, but with wide variation among countries. The average overall tax burden revenue in the form of taxes was 25% of the GDP among advanced economies and 17% of the GDP amongst emerging markets and developing economies. The overall average of the proportion of government expenditure funded by taxes was about 65% among advanced economies and 60% among emerging markets. Information and communications technologies. More than half of the world's population is now, at the end of 2019, 53.6% of the individuals, or 4.1 billion persons, were using the internet, ranging from only 20% in Oceania, excluding Australia and New Zealand, and 26% in sub-Saharan African, to 84% in Europe and North America, and 87% in Australia and New Zealand. Fixed broadband subscriptions are increasing globally. There were nearly 15 fixed broadband subscriptions for every 100 inhabitants in 2019, ranging from 33.6 in developed countries to only 11.2 in developing countries. In least developed countries, owing to the high cost and lack of infrastructure, there were nearly no fixed broadband connections. From a health, economic, and social perspective, this digital divide is costing developing countries and their peoples dearly during the pandemic. Capacity building. Total ODA for capacity building and national planning stood at 33.5 billion US dollars in 2017, representing 14% of total sector allocable aid, stable since the main sectors assisted were public administration, energy, finance, which received a total of 13 billion US dollars. Trade. Trade weighted tariffs worldwide declined from 2% in 2017 to an average of 2.1% in 2018. The share of exports of least developed countries in global merchandise trade remained marginal, at just 1% in growth in global exports of least developed countries stagnated over the past decade, missing the target of doubling the share of global exports of least developed countries, recorded significant year-on-year growth in services exports, reaching a global share of 0.8%. The share of global services exports of developing regions has flattened in past years, amounting to a share of 30% at the end of 2018. Data, monitoring, and accountability. In 2019, 132 countries reported having national statistical legislation that was compliant with the fundamental principles of official statistics, up from 111 countries in 2019. 141 countries reported having implemented a national statistical plan, up from 129 countries although it had the second highest number of countries, 36, implementing national statistical plans. Sub-Saharan Africa had the lowest percentage of fully funded plans, with only 25% of plans fully funded, compared with 95% in Northern America and Europe. In 2017, countries received 689 million US dollars in support from multilateral and bilateral donors for all areas of statistics, up from $623 million. However, that amount accounted for only 0.34% of total ODA. International funding for data and statistics was at only around half the level at which it needed to be. In the period 2014 to 2018, 147 countries had birth registrations data that were at least 90% complete, and 153 countries had death registrations data that were at least 75% In sub-Saharan Africa, 28 of 53 countries had birth registration data, and only 23 of 53 countries had death registration data. Decade of action. In recognition of the urgency of the 2030 Agenda, the Decade of Action calls for accelerating sustainable solutions to all the world's biggest challenges, ranging from poverty and gender to climate change, inequality, and closing the finance gap. In September 2019, the UN Secretary General called on all sectors of the society to mobilize for a decade of action on three levels: global action to secure greater leadership, more resources, and smarter solutions for the sustainable development goals; local action embedding the needed transition in the policies, budgets, institutions, and regulatory frameworks of governments, cities, and local authorities; and people action, including by youth, civil society, the media, the private sector, unions, academia, and other stakeholders to generate an unstoppable movement pushing for the required transformations. Partnership enabling ecosystem, partnership accelerator. The 2030 Agenda Partnership Accelerator is a collaborative initiative to United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs and the partnering initiative in collaboration with the United Nations Office of Partnerships, UN Global Compact, and the UN Development Coordination Office. Partnership enabling ecosystem must have following characteristics: A. Individuals with partnering knowledge and skills; B. Organizations that are fit for partnering; C. Partnerships built to good practice standards; D. Platforms slash mechanisms to systematically catalyze partnerships; E. National and international policy supportive of collaboration. The Partnership Accelerator aims to develop the partnership enabling ecosystem which can support the engagement of business as a partner in sustainable development and accelerate the number and effectiveness of partnerships towards delivering the 2030 Agenda. Its aims are to A. Raise understanding and build the partnering skills and competencies of UN and government staff alongside NGOs and business counterparts. This will result in as faster partnerships development and the creation of more robust, effective partnerships. B. Support the organizational change required for our institutions to become fit for partnering, enabling them to optimize the way they work and thus deliver more through far more efficient and effective partnering. C. Draw out good practice and support the development of the efficient SDG partnership platforms around the world, thereby creating the mechanism through which governments and the UN can systematically engage and partner with business and other development actors. The Partnering Initiative. The Partnering Initiative, TPI, is a leading international NGO dedicated to unleashing the power of partnerships for a prosperous and sustainable future. TPI has been a pioneer in the development of the theory and practice of multi-stakeholder collaboration since it was founded in 2003, when it published its first seminal partnering toolkit translated into 11 languages and republished 3 times. TPI continues to drive and codify the state of the art of effective partnership practice while building up the partnership enabling ecosystem through training individuals, supporting organizations to become institutionally fit for partnering, supporting the strategy, development, evaluation, and best practice guidance for partnerships, building in country platforms to catalyze partnership, and inputting into international policy development. UNDESA, United Nations Department of Economics and Social Affairs. UNDESA is a vital interface between global policies and national action in the economic, social, and environmental spheres. Rooted in the United Nations Charter and guided by universal and transformative 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and other global agreements, the UN-DESA responds to the needs and priorities of the global community. First principle for partnerships: joining the dots. Most of us work in operating environments that encourage a sense of competition and separation rather than collaboration and cooperation. We are often told that there is a scarcity of resources and that our job is to secure for ourselves and for our own organizations as much for the available resources as possible, and that if others lose out in the process, then that's too bad. Rather than starting from an assumption of competition and scarcity, what happens if we start with a different assumption? It's a very liberating thought to join the dots between resources in new ways, including thinking differently about what the word resources even means. And this requires creative capacities which most of us have in abundance but rarely draw upon. You are at the center. Effective partnerships, self awareness, knowing what you are good at, your patterns of behavior and tendencies, and areas for further growth. Contextual awareness, knowing what is happening in your immediate environment, both professionally and socially, in your organization, that of your partners, and beyond. And awareness of complex interplay, yourself, between yourself and your context. A new area and a new approach to international development. Top down, short term, single sector approaches generally cannot deliver long lasting impact. The system is too complex. The 2030 Agenda, through engaging and working with all societal sectors in a bottom up approach, informed and supported by top down experience, technology, finance, and coordination globally, is a way of being far more deliberate and targeted in accelerating a society's natural organic development process towards sustainability. There are three major considerations for the new era of international development. A, business, society, and the environment are strongly interconnected and must move together to ensure progress and long-term sustainability. Business or the environment prospering at the expense of people results in civil unrest. Business or society prospering at the expense of the environment leads to pollution and climate chaos. Sustainable development can only happen if we progress at all three strands together. B, our world has limited resources, whether financial, technological, natural, or human. And as a society, we must optimize the use of such resources to deliver sustainable development for everyone's benefit. Building on the intrinsic alignment of interests among the holder of those resources, business, governments, civil society, academia, etc., all actors must play their unique roles and utilize their unique resources with partnerships and essential means to maximize the collective impact of available resources. C, further, the goals are highly interconnected. Water clearly is an essential component of health, sanitation, and agriculture. Malnutrition can never be tackled without also engaging around agriculture, the food industry, health, and education. This move to system transformational development requires acknowledgement of the interconnection between the SDGs and the need for holistic approaches that engage with and cut across issues. Partnering as the new normal. While Goal 17 of the SDGs explicitly talks about a global partnership for development and has a target 17.17 specifically related to multi-stakeholder collaboration, the reality is that all of the goals necessarily requires the involvement of and significant collaboration across all societal sectors. It is partnership at the national, subnational, and city level, those that can best harness and optimize the resources available. That will drive forward the real change required to deliver the SDGs and impact people's lives for the better. The challenge for all stakeholders is thus, how can we systematically collaborate across different societal sectors towards delivering the shared vision of the SDGs? How can partnerships genuinely become the new normal? Business as an important sector in development. As we have seen, when businesses operate indifferently to or worse at the expense of society or the environment, this invariably leads to inequality and or the destruction of the environment. Business doing business responsibly, inclusively, and sustainably is positive for societies and for development. It creates and sustains livelihoods, reduces poverty, generates taxes, delivers essential products and services efficiently and affordably, catalyzes technological innovation, reduces reliance on imports, and or brings in essential foreign currency revenues through exports. Indeed, business has been one of the lead drivers in every country which has come out of poverty. That is why governments, donors, the UN, and NGOs are engaged with companies both to help catalyze business investment and to improve the responsibility, sustainability, and inclusivity of business. Business has a considerable environmental, economic, and societal footprint due to the wide reach of its activities and the multiple relationships that it maintains across its supply chains. Business has direct and indirect influence and impact on several levels. Each level of influence and impact presents an opportunity for business to take specific action to mitigate risks or to actively promote environmental, economic, and social well being. Business as a partner in development. Business becomes a partner in development when it looks beyond immediate short term financial gain and towards building long term business and societal value instead. In practice, many companies are still most focused on short term financial considerations, but there is a growing movement of purpose driven or SDG aligned business activity, which takes a broader view of the company's operations. In August 2019, for example, the Business Roundtable, a US based alliance of 181 CEOs, signed a new statement on the purpose of a corporation, in which they committed to lead their companies for the benefit of all stakeholders, customers, employees, suppliers, communities, and shareholders. Building blocks of effective partnerships. For partnerships to deliver as effectively as possible, there are a set of four key building blocks that need to be developed and continuously maintained. The building blocks are distilled from the success factors of partnership highlighted by multiple organizations over many years. A. Fundamentals, the basis for partnerships in the first place. Partnerships must be able to create significant value, and the right partners at the table must be included to be successful. Following fundamentals for partnership need to be in place. Number one, significant added value in comparison with the resources required. Number two, inclusion of all key stakeholders holding essential resources. Number three, compelling shared overarching vision with sufficient alignment of interest to deliver net benefit to all partners. Four, sufficient compatibility of values in relation to the closeness of collaboration. Five, partners are sufficiently empowered and enabled to be able to contribute to the partnerships. Six, senior level commitment and representatives have a partnering mindset and skill set. B. Partnership relationship. One, the complex, multifaceted, dynamic relationship among partners must be kept strong. Two, partnerships are driven by a complex and ever changing relationship among the partners. Strong, trust based relationships can overcome the inevitable challenges of partnering, help partners to go the extra mile, and deliver extraordinary results. Three, partnerships where the relationship Partnerships where the relationship is poor will deliver suboptimally or fail. 4. The key elements of the partnership relationship are: number 1, trust and transparency; number 2, power balance and equity; number 3, mutual benefit; number 4, accountability and commitment. Structuring and setup. Number 1, the partnership structure should be fit for the purpose. Number 2, every partnership has its own unique structure and setup. The governance, management, operational, and reporting arrangements to deliver effectively. Number 3, key elements of the structure and setup are: 1, legal slash fiduciary arrangement; 2, governance, management, and operational structure; 3, partnership documentation; 4, theory of change; 5, funding and resourcing. Management. 1. The partnership should be well managed and requires the application of leadership at multiple levels. 2. The partnership should be well managed and requires the application of leadership at multiple levels. 3. Partnership management and leadership includes the following elements. Number 1, leadership; 2, result-oriented project management; 3, risk reduction and troubleshooting; 4, monitoring, review, and iteration; 5, communication; 6, learning and knowledge sharing; 7, relationship management. Islamic perspective on SDG 17. A successful sustainable development agenda requires partnerships between governments, the private sector, and civil society. These inclusive partnerships built upon principles and value, a shared vision, and a shared goals that place people and the planet at the center are needed at the global, regional, national, and local level. The idea of cooperation and partnerships is fundamental to Islamic societies. Mutual cooperation and solidarity is a norm central to Islamic ethics. The second verse of Surah Al-Ma'idah in Holy Quran says, assist one another in the doing of good and righteousness. Assist not one another in sin and transgression, but keep your duty to Allah. Surah Al-Ma'idah, ayah number 2. A hadith by Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam reinforces this principle of cooperation and mutual assistance. Believers are to other believers like parts of a structure that tightens and reinforces each other. Al-Bukhari and Muslim. SDG 17 targets: strengthen domestic resource mobilization, including through international support to developing countries to improve domestic capacity for tax and other revenue collection. Develop countries to implement fully their official development assistance commitments, including the commitment by many developed countries to achieve the target of 0.7% of ODA/GNI to developing countries and 0.15 to 0.20% of ODA/GNI to least developed countries. ODA providers are encouraged to consider setting a target to provide at least 0.20% of ODA/GNI to least developed countries. Mobilize additional financial resources for developing countries from multiple sources. Assist developing countries in attaining long-term debt sustainability through coordinated policies aimed at fostering debt financing, debt relief, and debt restructuring as appropriate, and address the external debt of highly indebted poor countries to reduce debt distress. Adopt and implement investment promotion regimes for least developed countries. Technology. Enhance North-South, South-South, and triangular regional and international cooperation on and access to science, technology, and innovation, and enhance knowledge sharing on mutually agreed terms, including through improved coordination among existing mechanisms, in particular at the United Nations level and through a global technology facilitation mechanism. Promote the development, transfer, dissemination, and diffusion of environmentally sound technologies to developing countries on favorable terms, including on concessional and preferential terms as mutually agreed. Fully mobilize the technology bank and science, technology, and innovation capacity building mechanisms for least developed countries by 2017 and enhance the use of enabling technology, in particular information and communication technology. Capacity building. Enhance international support for implementing effective and targeted capacity building in developing countries to support national plans to implement all the sustainable development goals, including through North-South, South-South, and triangular cooperation. Trade. Promote a universal, rule-based, open and non-discriminatory and equitable multilateral trading system under the World Trade Organization, including through the conclusion of negotiations under its Doha development agenda. Significantly increase the export of developing countries, in particular with a view to doubling the least developed countries' share of global exports by 2020. Realize timely implementation of duty-free and quota-free market access on a lasting basis for all least developed countries, consisting with World Trade Organization decisions, including by ensuring that preferential rules of origin applicable to imports from least developed countries are transparent and simple, and contribute to facilitating market access. Systemic issues, policy and institutional coherence. Enhance global macroeconomic stability, including through policy coordination and policy coherence. Enhance policy coherence for sustainable development. Respect each country's policy space and leadership to establish and implement policies for poverty eradication and sustainable development. Multi-stakeholder partnerships. Enhance the global partnership for sustainable development, complemented by multi-stakeholder partnerships that mobilize and share knowledge, expertise, technology, and financial resources to support the achievement of the sustainable development goals in all countries, in particular developing countries. Encourage and promote effective public-private, and civil society partnerships, building on the experience and resourcing strategies of partnerships. Data monitoring and accountability. By 2020, enhance capacity building support to developing countries, including for least developed countries and small island developing states, to increase significantly the availability of high quality, timely, and reliable data disaggregated by income, gender, age, race, ethnicity, migratory status, disability, geographic location, and other characteristics relevant in national contexts. By 2030, build on existing initiatives to develop measurements of progress on sustainable development that complement gross domestic product and support statistical capacity building in developing countries. That concludes my today's talk, ladies and gentlemen. I'm profoundly thankful to all of you for listening to me, as well as passing it on to others. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestow his guidance upon you all and grant you what is best suited for you. Allah Hafiz, till next time.